Hi folks, and welcome to the course 52 Weeks of Python. This is a class where I will teach you over the course of 52 weeks how to become a programmer or a coder or a software developer or whatever you want to call it. Now I've called this class 52 Weeks of Python because I intend to create approximately one session every week over the course of an entire year. And over the course of that year, at the end, you should be able to develop some of the things that you can see on the screen behind the title 52 Weeks of Python. Now, before you go too far, you're probably asking yourself, why should I listen to this guy, Chuck Black? I don't even know what he is. So I'm telling you a little bit about myself. I did spend 31 years doing research and development for HP Networking, writing software for networks. I did spend 8 years as a co-founder of Talak Networks. I've been a software developer, I've been a lead, I've been an architect, and for about 5 years I spent time as an SDN developer and teacher and speaker and as an author. The book SDN, A Comprehensive Approach, is used in university graduate level mainly courses on software-defined networking. So to use an American idiom, I have been around the block a few times. I do kind of know what's going on. I've been involved in it for a long time. Whether that means you should believe me or not, I'll let you be the determiner of that. But that is my background. Now let me tell you a little bit about what you will learn in this course. In this course, I'm going to teach you about lists and dictionaries and loops in Python. I'm going to teach you about how to deal with different data modeling types like YAML or JSON, specifically reading files, returning data from REST requests, etc. In the course of this class, you will learn about object-oriented programming, such as classes and objects, which you may or may not use yourself, but which you will be a consumer of when it comes to using libraries such as NetMiko, Napalm, SQL Alchemy, and the like. I'm going to teach you how to communicate with network devices using some of those libraries that I've just mentioned. I'm going to teach you how to create web applications which can serve up either web pages or RESTful APIs, and I'm going to be using the very popular and very simple Flask library in order to do that. We are going to be building databases which are very simple with the library SQL Alchemy. Since dealing with networking devices involves a lot of waiting for the devices to reply, concurrency comes into the equation. And so we're going to talk about different methods of doing things concurrently, such as multi-threading. I'm going to teach you about IDEs, which stands for Integrated Development Environment. Specifically, I'll be showing you all of the code in PyCharm and telling you how to use it. Lastly, in order to make you a full-fledged network developer, I'm going to teach you about software development technologies and tools such as Git for storing your data and keeping versions, Jira for keeping track of your modeling, and unit testing, which is very important. Now I'm going to be spending some time showing you and demonstrating what I've built in just 3 weeks using Python primarily and a little bit of JavaScript to serve up pretty web pages like I'm showing on the screen here. The things that you're looking at are going to show you devices that I have in my network and that I monitor and maintain compliance status of. I'm discovering automatically hosts in my network, and I'm maintaining a recording of their availability and their response time. And I've also spent a little bit of time developing a service monitoring functionality in this little application that I've written, so you can go out to different services and make sure that they are working. What am I using to do this? In Python, I'm using lists, I'm using dictionaries, I'm using loops, I'm using mechanisms in libraries such as I've referred to before. But don't worry, my motto is everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. So I've done everything in as simple a manner as possible so you can learn and understand it. I do want to spend a moment telling you what this class is not. I'm not intending to spend a whole lot of time going through different tools. There are many websites available that are very good, that are out there. I'm showing you a few of them Right there, they will teach you and give you little code segments of how to do various tasks. They even have classes that you can take either for fee or for free, I'm assuming, that will teach you stuff. I'm not intending to do that. I'm teaching you to become a software developer. That's what my goal is. Now, lastly, I want to tell you this. I myself am not a trainer. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not an influencer. I'm not a Twitterer, although I may get onto Twitter if people are interested in me doing that. In short, I'm not a professional at doing what I'm attempting to do right now. I'm a software developer, and that's what my skills are. And I've been doing this, as you could see when I described who I am, for approximately 40 years or so. And I'm spending some time to put these videos out there because I think that Python is a very good language to help people who are interested in going from either nothing or something in order to be a very competent and skilled software developer. So I apologize if my videos aren't super flashy, if my delivery is not wonderful, if my voice, I'm kind of stuck with my voice, that's kind of the way it is. I don't look particularly good, but I do have a skill, and that is a skill in being able to take complex things and make them simple so that people can understand it. And that's my intention of this in this course. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time at the beginning telling you what to expect in this course. Okay, so before we get too far, I wanted to give you a quick tour of this little prototype that I've created in the last 3 weeks in order to teach this class. And my goal is that by the end of this class, you guys also will be able to create software that does something like this. Now, what you're looking at is a project that I'm calling quokka, which is an animal that lives in Western Australia. You can look it up. I'm showing you right now my devices table, which is listing the devices that I am monitoring in my network. So these two right here that start with CML, those are in my Cisco modeling lab that's running also on my laptop. These two right here are in the Cisco always on sandbox, and I'm monitoring those devices. If I want to go into any one of them, I can dive down and get information about response time and availability, CPU utilization, and memory utilization for those devices. For that one, I've only been monitoring for a little bit of time. This one right here is showing you a little bit more interesting data. When I go out to the Cisco cloud to monitor these devices, you can see some of them go up and down periodically. This one here has been the one that's given me the more interesting data. You can see the response time varies, and I'll go into this in greater detail as we go through the class. You should be able to create software that does exactly this by the time you're done listening to this class. Now, not only do I have my devices table, I also have my compliance table. This is the same list of devices as you can tell, but the difference is I'm monitoring the software version to see if it meets a standard that I have set, and to check the configuration to see if the configuration that I'm pulling off of that device matches the standard configuration that I have stored on my system. I'm also, just for fun, I automatically discovered all of the devices on my local network here at my home. So as you can see, there's a couple of Amazon devices. Those may be Amazon Kindles, or we have an Amazon Fire Stick. I have a Google Home device. This thing right here is actually my cell phone. This thing right here is my doorbell. There's a bunch of other stuff. If I was to scroll down this table, these things right here are smart wireless plugs that allow me to turn on and off the lights, certain lights in the house. So that's basically what I've got that I'm monitoring. And also for these devices, I'm monitoring the availability, that's the status, and the response time. And if I go over here, I can see maps of the response time for these particular items. I'm going to go back to hosts. Now I'm going to show you the services table. I'm also created a little tiny service monitoring component to my application that will monitor DNS services, HTTP services, as well as NTP services. And as you can see, I've configured a few of these here. This one, 8.8.8.8, you may recognize as Google's name service. This one here is some other open name service, I'm looking up baskinrobbins.com, and I'm getting a response time back in a certain number of milliseconds. This is listed in milliseconds. I'm probably going to clean this up. You will see that this is kind of a work in progress, and I will be making improvements to this as we go. HTTP monitoring is just doing HTTPS to various websites. This BBC website seems to give me interesting lack of availability periodically. I'm not sure why, but you can see that availability comes up and down, and you can see the response time that I'm monitoring here. Now, one thing that I'm planning to add is response time and availability over time. That would be a summary for like an entire day, averaged by hour. Obviously, you could extend that to be over a week or a month or whatever, but that's the kind of stuff that I'm doing in this project. The last thing I'll show you is the event log. So I implemented a very cheap and cheerful event log that I just put whenever I have availability or other failures. You can see these are all availability. I'm putting it into the event log. One thing that you'll notice that's kind of handy here is I can type in my search and find in this situation only the warning items. I can also go and I can sort. This is something that is available via some of the JavaScript functionality. So you do get a lot of good things with some of the tools that we have. Now, like I said, this is implemented primarily in Python. All the hard work is being done in Python. The presentation part is being done in JavaScript. And during the course of this class, you will be learning to do all of the things that I've just demonstrated here. Okay, folks, so I want to give you a little bit of an idea of how I develop software. Now, you don't have to do it exactly as I do it. It's perfectly acceptable and feasible to write Python code that will run on a Mac or on Windows or on a Linux type of operating system like Ubuntu, CentOS, or whatever it might be. In my experience, in my development of software over the past many years, we tend to develop software inside our own virtual machine that we have created and that we are able to manage in the way that we find the most suitable. Many tools happen to be more suitable towards Linux-based operating systems such as Ubuntu than they do on Windows or on Macs. So just be aware of that. But be that as it may, you can choose to do it however you like. This is what I do. The first thing in this process of getting a system set up would be to download your virtualization software. So you can download a VMware Workstation Player, which is free. You can also download VirtualBox, which is owned now by Oracle. I actually tend to prefer VirtualBox just because it's always been free and I find fewer entanglements with it. However, I've been compelled to run my operating system on which I develop software within VMware simply because that's where Cisco's modeling labs, which you see over here down on the left-hand side, has been implemented for. And so I've decided to go ahead and do my VM, which you can see right here. I call it Quokka Ubuntu 20. It is running within VMware Workstation Player. Now, be aware, however, that I have also run this VM within VirtualBox, and it all runs the same. So you can choose the one that you like depending on your particular needs. Now, how do you download VMware? You go and Google download VMware Workstation Player or something similar. This will bring you to a page such as this. You can click on download that's appropriate for the environment on which you are going to run your host. This is your VMware software will be running on the host, which is going to be your Windows laptop or Mac or even Linux if you happen to use that naturally. So you'll download it, and then I won't show you the details of this, but it downloads for me on Windows an executable that I run. It goes through a bunch of things in order to get itself installed, and bam, it's there, and it looks something like this, except you will have no VMs obviously loaded in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the process of installing Ubuntu 20 on your VMware Workstation Player. So in order to do that, the first thing that you're going to want to do is go and Google or what Bing or whatever your search tool of, which is your whatever is your favorite. Go and Google Ubuntu 20 happens to be the most recent one. I probably would recommend only going with these LTS versions. That stands for long-term support. So you'll see that every other major number. So Ubuntu 12, 14, 16, 18, etc. I believe have LTS versions. So if you go there and say, hey, I want to download this, then you can do that and it will download for you an ISO image. And this ISO image will be used by you when you bring up your VM within VMware or VirtualBox. So I've already done that. I can show you that it exists here in my downloads folder. I've done this a while ago. Just as an aside, I actually began working on this Quokka project in VirtualBox. And what I ended up doing when I realized I would want to switch over to VMware Player because of CML running there, all I did was I exported my VM from VirtualBox and I imported it into VMware and everything worked fine without a problem. So you can, at least in theory and in some experience, swap between the two. Now here you can see that this ISO has been downloaded by me. As you can see, it's quite large. It's 2.5 gig. So it's just sitting there and ready for me to use it. So why don't I begin to go through the process? Okay, in order to load and create a new virtual machine, you're going to want, with VMware Workstation Player, you're going to want to go here to Player. You're going to want to go to File, and you're going to want to say New Virtual Machine. It'll pop up a dialog for you, and your dialog is going to ask you for the installer disk image file. That's the ISO file that we were just talking about and that you can see over here. I've highlighted in my downloads folder. So I'm going to click on Browse. I'm going to go up. You can see I was here before. This is in my downloads folder. I'm going to click on this one, click on Open, and now it knows it's going to use an installer disk image, my ISO file, from this file that I've just told it about. Now I'm going to click Next. This part is probably pretty boring. What you're going to do is you're going to come in and tell VMware Workstation the name of your system. You're going to give it your username. You're going to make up a password for it. You are going to confirm that password. And if you've typed it correctly, which hopefully I have, it will let you go to the next page. I can give the virtual machine name, which I'm going to call Quokka Training, because I'm doing this while I'm recording a training video. And now it's going to ask me for the size of my disk. Now 20 gig is probably okay in most cases, but when I've developed software, I end up loading a whole bunch of other stuff onto it. And virtualization software these days do a very good job, at least VirtualBox. I can't verify this for VMware. They do a good job of only allocating space on your own hard drive that it requires. So like if I were to say 100 gig here, then it would not allocate that. It would do it dynamically. That's true on VirtualBox. I'm assuming that it's true also on VMware, but I'm going to go ahead and say 40. I'm going to leave things selected as they are. This is just telling me what it's going to be doing. In my situation, I'm not using NAT, but for starters, you can go ahead and just use NAT for your networking, and you can always modify this stuff later on. So I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. And at this point in time, VMware is going to begin to boot my operating system. And you can see it's going through a bunch of stuff, checking the disks. It's going to begin to do this. Now, this is a fairly long process. So what I'm going to do at this point in time is shut up, let it record, and then I will fast forward through this whole process so that you don't have to sit here while this is going on. Okay, so now we have Ubuntu installed. You'll see over here on the right-hand side, this is my Ubuntu. I had downloaded it before over here. We don't need that anymore. And so now the question is, okay, what do I have running inside the VM? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my other VM, which is the one that has all of the Quokka stuff running inside it. I have a number of IDEs here. You can see my Quokka that we were looking at earlier. I actually have it continuing to run in the background. Here's the output from my web application Flask. You can see I'm doing discoveries, I'm gathering information about devices constantly, etc. So the easiest way to look to see, okay, well, what might I want to have over on my brand new Ubuntu system would be to look at what I have pinned to the launcher over here, things that are of interest to me. So one thing I see is of interest is the terminal. You can see here's my terminal windows. I'm going to want to do that for any of a number of things. You may want to actually just develop code using VI or something like that if you choose not to use an IDE like PyCharm, but you will certainly want to use it for running your applications like I am in the background. And so how do we get there from here in Ubuntu? Well, the way you do it with Ubuntu 20 is we go down here to the bottom, we type in show applications. I'm going to type in terminal, and here you see terminal shows up, so I'm going to click on that, and it's popped up a terminal. Now the thing that I'm going to want to do now is I'm going to want to say add to favorites. So from now on, I won't have to go down here to the bottom. I can just click on what's over here. You'll notice on the left-hand side that my icons are smaller than the ones over here. That's because I've gone and done some customization via settings. You can come in here and say settings, and there's settings, pops up hopefully, and it shows you all of these different things you can do to customize it. And as you can see over here on the far left, I've actually pinned that to my launcher, so I'm going to say add that to favorites as well, and then you can come in here and modify the appearance however you like. So let's look at some other things that I have. I have the terminal, I have settings, I've actually installed Google Chrome. You don't have to do that. You can see that Firefox comes for free, so if you're comfortable with Firefox, you can do that. I have two IDEs. IDE is an integrated development environment, and what that does is it allows you to write code in such a simpler and easier and more powerful way than you're able to do if you just use an editor like VI over here in a terminal. And so that is what I would recommend. Here I'm going to show you my PyCharm. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger just so you can appreciate it a little bit more. It does a number of things for you. It color codes the things that you can put here. I can see that my strings look a particular way. Keywords look a different way. So it's extremely helpful. If I put in something stupid here, then what will end up happening is it will flag it with squiggly red underline, and it will actually tell me what the problem is. It has no idea what that is. I can easily do Control Z to get rid of that. I can have multiple things that I'm looking at a time. I can come in here and say, okay, well, I want to look at this other file as well. I can make it easier to see by shrinking that and making that bigger. Most notably, I can come here and I can run stuff and I can debug stuff. And so we'll be getting into this, but I can step through my code line by line and figure out what the problem is. You'll see me doing that a lot in the sessions to come. So IDEs are extremely useful and I highly recommend them. And I have one for my Python code that we've talked about, and then I have one for the JavaScript code. Now, I'm not a JavaScript programmer. In the 3 weeks I mentioned that I've been working on this, I taught myself how to do JavaScript in a short amount of time. There are a number of really nice libraries that help you to do stuff. Most of the things that you hear is the Material UI. That is all from Google contributed that library, and React, that was contributed by Facebook. So there's a lot of really useful stuff that you will be able to make use of. So don't worry too much about the JavaScript side of things. But whoops, I made that go away. Didn't mean to do that. Let's pull that back. What I was intending to do is go through here and point out what I have. Now, one thing that I had for a while was a system monitor because I thought I was having issues. One thing that you may want to have is Postman. Now, Postman is really useful because it can help you make REST API calls, which you will be doing to your software. And when you do that, you will be able to debug issues that you have with the code that you have written. So what you can do, as you will see once this boots up, you can see I've got under Quokka, I've got a number of things that I can actually get from here. I can reset host. Let me see if I have anything. If I click on events, let me see if this is actually working. I haven't tested this. There it went and it made the request to my web service that I've created, as I mentioned. And here it's returning this JSON data that is showing me all of the events that you can actually see when you look at it here in the events table. So my user interface is doing exactly the same thing that Postman does, but the user interface is actually printing it up in this nice table. So this is my development environment. Things that I have installed over here. You will see that if I do Python -- version, it will show me that I've typed that incorrectly because Python is not there. But if I do Python 3 and version, it's showing me that I'm running Python 3.8.2. Now for Ubuntu 20, Python 3 came installed for free. What you will be doing, I can run Python programs, but if you want to install stuff that is Python related, then you're going to want to use pip. And so what you will end up doing is installing pip, which will be pip3, and a number of other things. And as we go through this whole process and you begin to get things set up, I will tell you more and more about this. Okay, so just to get the ball rolling with respect to setting up your system, you can see here I'm still on my Ubuntu system that I have just installed. It's got pretty much everything standard right now. As we showed before, I can type in Python 3. I'll be in Python 3 here. I can say print Chuck, if I can spell it correctly, and it will print that out. I can exit out of here. And now I can begin to think about, okay, what other things do I need? Now, one of the things that you will use in Python to install a lot of Python packages is pip. So I can try typing in pip3 here, and you can see that it's not installed. And Ubuntu helpfully tells me that I can actually install it in this manner. So I'm going to do sudo apt install Python 3 dash, and I can use the tab key here. I don't want to do all of these, but you can see I can do autocomplete. It'll give me my options. I'm going to install Python pip, type in my sudo password. It's going to tell me all the things that it's going to install, and I can see that it's going to be working on this in order to install the packages that it needs in order to become a package installer. So this is what one of the first steps that you're going to want to do. Let me make this a little bit bigger so it's a little bit more friendly to read. I'm going to pause here and let this finish. Okay, so we can see that pip3 is installed. If I were to type in pip3, then it would tell me that I need to give it some more information so I can see that it's there and up and running. Now, some of the stuff that we're going to need in order to do software development, or at least that I would recommend, would be to have an IDE. And as I've mentioned, I'm using PyCharm. And the tool that we use on Ubuntu, the easiest way to install it, in my opinion, or at least one way, is to use Snap, which is a relatively newish installer for Ubuntu systems. So in order to install PyCharm, I'm going to say snap install PyCharm, and what I'm going to install is PyCharm Community. PyCharm Community is the free one, and -- classic gives me the version that will truly be free for my use. So this is what I'm going to do. It's going to ask me for my password. I'm going to type that in, and now we'll see that it will be installing PyCharm. And I'll pause while this occurs. Okay, at this point in time, you can see we have PyCharm successfully installed, or at least apparently successfully. Let me see if I can type in PyCharm here and have it actually be understood. So PyCharm-community, I'm going to put an ampersand, which is going to allow it to start and then return me to the command line. So PyCharm, as you can see by the stuff it's printing out here, is going to begin to get started. In the background, it's asking for me to confirm the privacy policy. I'm going to say, go ahead and send anonymous statistics. I'll help out if I can. It's going to allow me to have certain choices here at the beginning. I'm going to allow it to use dark EULA, which is the dark background that I favor. I'm not going to install any of these extra things because I'm not really interested. I'm going to click on Start Using PyCharm. It's going to load PyCharm, and at the beginning, this is one of the more confusing things. When PyCharm starts out like the first time, it's going to allow me to open an existing project or files or to create a new project. Because we are just starting out, the easiest thing for me to do is to say create new project. So I'm going to click on this button to create my new project. I'm going to let everything be the same, except I'm going to rename it test project for now, and I'm going to say create. And at this point in time, PyCharm, as you can see, is about up and running. It's downloading some packages. It gives me tips. I'm going to say, okay, go ahead and close that. And lo and behold, I have my PyCharm IDE up and running. And I am going to make this bigger. So you can see PyCharm right here. As soon as it gets back to where it was, I have my test project. I can create a program that will run. I'm going to say, go ahead and give me a new Python file, and I'm going to name it test and say, go ahead and create that. Now I have a file here. I'm going to try to do the thing that I was doing before, print chuck, close quote. And now I have a program. Let me see if I can successfully run this program. And lo and behold, I can't run this program because I'm actually running inside this virtual environment and I have not specified an interpreter. So here we are in our test project, and if I want to create some code for it just to test things out, then I can right click on it, go to new, say I want a new Python file. I can name it test. It will create a file for me called test.py. I'm going to do my silly little one line of code and see it right here. And at this point in time, I should be able to right click on it and say, okay, run test. And as you can see, here's the output. It ran test successfully. One of the nice things, just to not spend too much time on PyCharm at this moment, but you can see here there's a little squiggly line under there. It says up, there's no new line at the end of the file. All right, well, I can fix that pretty easily. Now that I've fixed that, I can come over here and see the little happy green check mark. It means everything is okay. Once again, as I mentioned before, if you do type in something that's bad, it will tell you the problem. It'll say, okay, well, there's an unresolved reference. I can fix that and get it back to a working situation. Now, the nice thing about a IDE like PyCharm is I can do things like set breakpoints, and I can say run this in the debugger, and what it has done is it has stopped right here. I'm allowed to look at variables. I don't really have anything of interest. I can look at the console, which nothing has been printed to, and I can say, because there's nothing really interesting, you'll see me do this more later on, but I can say, okay, go ahead and run it. It's actually telling me that I clicked the wrong button. It says, do you want to stop and rerun it? No, of course I don't. I'm just a fool. That's not where you click it. You want to click it down here because I'm in the debugger. And if I want to continue, then I just click this And lo and behold, it ran. If I look at the console, here's my console output and everything's good. Anyway, that's PyCharm. I can go over here and add PyCharm to my favorites so that the next time I come in here, I'm going to exit PyCharm. The next time I come in, then I will be able to launch it from there, and my environment is getting back to being nice and handy, just like my other environment over here that has gone to sleep because I'm not there right now. I need to type in the password. You can see in this environment, here's my UI, here is my PyCharm, and if I make this big, then you will eventually see that, yeah, I have a lot of stuff going on here. I'm able to write code, do things, see how stuff is working. You can see here I have my project Quokka, which is the stuff that's running in the background that we were looking at just a minute ago. And here I have something called Python Netmon. This is where I have small applications that I will be using for teaching, and that you can run individually in order to find out if your software that you are creating is actually working. Here I'm running that device piece of code, which is just printing out my device as you see right here. Anyway, that's PyCharm. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how to get started with that. I will touch on installing other things later as we use them. Those are mainly used for functionality that we get into later on. When we start with basics, of course, you won't need a whole bunch of fancy stuff. Just PyCharm or whatever IDE or non-IDE you choose to use will be just fine. Okay, so just to wrap up what we've been talking about, I've explained to you what we're going to do in this class. We're going to talk about Python basics like lists, dictionaries, and loops. We're going to deal with data types like YAML and JSON. We're going to learn about classes and objects, networking devices, how to build a web application, how to use databases, how to do concurrency, and also some software development stuff like IDEs, Git, Jira, etc. That's what we'll be covering in this class that I'm calling 52 Weeks of Python. Just as a reminder, I'm intending to create 52 different lessons that will be posted and that you will be able to learn from, and hopefully at the end you'll be able to build an application just like I've been demonstrating to you today. So that's it for me, Chuck Black, for now. Thanks and goodbye. But wait, there's more. For fun, I created time lapse of a number of the Quokka screens getting filled in. Enjoy.